And we've got ourselves a 9. Well, not what am I talking? Yesterday was 9. Today we got 13 games, man. 13 games to talk about. Tuesday night, full slate here. You had the deep dive today. How did that come about? Or how did that go?
Pretty good.
How did it go?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty well. It's nowhere near as much pitching as we had yesterday, but a couple of cheap guys that I think we can get to in tournament lineups, if we have to. And I think, clear-cut pitching at the top. So I think it should be a pretty good slate. I always like the bigger slates because ownership obviously doesn't play as big a role since everything's just kind of spread out.
All right, well, we've got an hour to talk about it. We're glad to have you guys with us, so let's just dive right into it. You mentioned to me before the show, and I agree. There are some games that don't really have much subject matter whatsoever tonight either.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple where the pitching isn't really interesting, the hitting really isn't interesting, and it's just not spots that I'm going to.
All right, Baltimore, Boston. That was a train wreck yesterday.
Yeah, can't wait to move on from that one. That was miserable.
Boston once again tied for the highest total on the slate, 5.9 against David Hess, 4.3 for Baltimore against Velasquez. Look, I was right on. We were right on. I mean, like VR, had a strong game. Chris Davis had a decent enough game at his price. The difference is, I just had way more interest in Boston, and that did not go according to plan. I mean, Adam, JD Martinez, I know it's baseball, but JD Martinez goose-egged against John Means and the Baltimore bullpen. So hopefully we can turn it around today. David Hess on the bump for Baltimore at Camden Yards. Temperatures 75 degrees in Baltimore. All signs point towards yes, but they did yesterday too.
Yeah, if you're going to pick between Hess and Means, I think Hess is the worst of the two pitchers by a pretty wide margin. So I do feel, even better going back here. Not that yesterday would, determine me regardless of who was pitching. But
yeah, what does Josh say about John Means now?
That he was wrong, probably.
That won't happen. Yeah, we're 1-1, 3-game series. Next start from John Means will decide this. So we'll see. But go ahead. What do you have on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Hess, it's just he doesn't really have anything. Last year, he had kind of shown flashes of a decent slider, and that was it. This season, that pitch is getting hammered as well, not getting as many swinging strikes either. He really has nothing to get lefties out. So guys like Benintendi, Devers, even Jackie Bradley, I think, are appealing. And then the righties in this lineup are just so good. It's clearly a good spot for them. You mentioned JD Martinez taking the 0 yesterday. Have you actually seen what his ISO is against right-handed pitching this season?
No, what is it?
0.058.
Whew. Really?
Yeah.
What's his expected ISO?
Like 245.
Oh, really? All right, I just pulled it up now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 0.058 and a 0.241 X ISO. That is crazy.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I'm still just jamming JD Martinez into a ton of lineups. Hopefully people get tired of it before he breaks out. But I think it's just one of those, we talk all the time about how long it takes stats to stabilize in baseball. And, it feels like we're far into the season. We're, over a month in now. But that's really nothing in the context of a full season. And there's nothing to suggest that JD Martinez is hurt or there's anything wrong with him. So I think that I'm perfectly happy to just keep going to JD.
As am I. It's got to turn around eventually. Last year, JD Martinez had a 315 ISO against righties, 317 X ISO. 2017, he had a 579. Did he get hurt that year? Yeah, I think he
2017.
did. 2017, he was hurt, right? Yeah, I believe he was.
I think that's the year he was traded to Arizona.
Was it? Now I can't even remember.
Maybe.
I don't remember. All I know is that he's a lot better than that. But yeah, looking over the lineup for Boston, I mean, you've got Benintendi, Mookie, Martinez, Moreland, Bogarts, Devers, Michael Chavis to the 7 spot, Bradley, and Vasquez down to the 9 hole. he was the one guy that did me well yesterday because I had him in a bunch of non-Boston stacks, but it didn't make much of a difference anyway. And now he's all the way down in the 9 spot. So outside of Martinez, who are you targeting most here? Is it the top of and middle of the lineup as usual, or are you willing to go to the bottom?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm fine getting to any part of this lineup because it's such a favorable matchup. I do think that guys like Mitch Moreland and Rafael Devers are pretty appealing because they are, I think, more expensive than they really should be in the context of the slate. Not in the context of the matchup, but when you compare them to other players at their position, I think they're a little expensive. But it is a better left-handed power park in Baltimore than it is in Boston. Boston plays up right-handed power much more so than left-handed power. And then Hess, again, he really has nothing to get lefties out. His fastball isn't good. His changeup isn't good. Both get absolutely blasted. So I think that, getting to those guys makes a lot of sense in addition to, the Benintendi, Betts, Martinez, Bogarts that, we always get to.
All right. What about the other side with Baltimore? Hector Velasquez on the bump. This guy, and you want to talk about someone that I know he has 19 strikeouts in 19 innings, but none of that really matters. How many innings are we going to get from him anyway?
Yeah, I'm not expecting him to go, really deep into this game. And the Orioles, while they're not a good offense, they really don't have a ton of strikeouts in this lineup either, outside of a couple individual hitters.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're getting him at a really, really cheap price tag or anything like that. So I'm not looking to go to Velasquez. Not really on Orioles bats either. I mean, if you get to Jonathan VR, I think that's fine leading off. Chris Davis batting fifth, I do like quite a bit. He's only 3,100 on DraftKings, and we've said it a bunch of times now. He really has not been bad at the plate this season. Like, everyone thinks he's been awful and he's a laughing stock because of last year and how he started out this year. But his expected ISO is well over 200 against right-handed pitching. He hit into some bad luck early in the season, and he's been driving the ball since. Velasquez over the last few years has been worse against lefties than righties, as we would expect. So, getting to Chris Davis at a cheap price point is pretty appealing. The issue is just the first base is pretty stacked on this slate.
Right. Yeah, I agree. As long as he's going to remain cheap, though, I don't have any concerns about it. Like I'm still willing to roster Davis at 31 on DraftKings, 24 on FanDuel. On Yahoo, a little bit different, but Davis is still, I think, what is he, $7? He's minimum salary. So it is deep, but if you're going to go somewhere cheap, Davis at Camden Yards against Velasquez is not the worst thing you could do whatsoever. All right, let's talk Pittsburgh and Texas then. Stephen Brault, Adrian Sampson. Another park I'd have more interest, but I'm not totally off. I'm not totally away from the idea that there could be some decent hitting in this game. What do you see in pitching and hitting for this one?
I don't have interest in the pitching. Stephen Brault's only thrown 8 and 2/3 innings this season in 4 appearances. So I'm not, anticipating him going really deep into this game or anything like that. And then on the other side, Adrian Sampson just doesn't get strikeouts. I have seen it talked about on Twitter and a couple places that Sampson so far has actually been really good at limiting production from left-handed hitters. And you have a lot of lefties in this Pittsburgh lineup. If you go back and look at his minor league numbers, that was the case there as well. But he still doesn't strike them out, so I'm not looking to go there. And in addition to that, he does throw his sinker two-seamer about 60% of the time to lefties. Gregory Polanco and Josh Bell in particular, both ridiculously high expected WOBAs, ridiculously high expected ISOs against right-handed sinkers in Sampson's velocity range. So I think that especially Polanco at 4,200 on DraftKings is pretty appealing. And then, I don't mind getting some Josh Bell or Starling Marte in there either. But you mentioned at the top that this ballpark really is not appealing because it plays down power. And we have so many teams in good hitters parks in good matchups. It's tough to really prioritize them.
Right. I feel the same way. I mean, would I be surprised if we saw Pittsburgh, drop 8 or 9 runs against Sampson? Not really. He's not very good, and you're not going to get him missing many bats, so at least the ball's going to be put in play. I really don't hate the idea of it. When you look, though, at some of the price points here, like Josh Bell is expensive. Marte, you're going to have to pay for him too. So if you are stacking Pittsburgh, you're going to have to forego either, another expensive stack in that or go with one relatively cheap pitcher. It's not like just because they're at a bad park, these Pittsburgh bats are discounted. They really aren't.
Yeah, the only one that is Polanco, and then you get to the guys like Moran and Cervelli that just aren't that good anyway.
Right.
But yeah, I'm right there with you. Like in my initial crunch on DraftKings, they were my seventh highest owned stack.
Okay, which seems about right on a 13-game slate. Toronto and Minnesota, Jose Berrios and Aaron Sanchez. What are your thoughts on Berrios? Because in this game, looking at the implied totals, you have a, what is it, 3 point, where is it against Berrios? I lost it. 4.1 for Toronto against Berrios. And then against Sanchez on the other side of this game, we are at, I lost my place, but also 4.1. So it's not the park's pretty decent for homers. It's a pretty neutral park, though. It's not anything special for hitters, but it's not bad either. Berrios, as we've discussed for his career, oddly but consistently way, way, way worse away from target field. He is pretty much in the same tier as Syndergaard and Steven Strasburg on DraftKings and on FanDuel. And then on Yahoo, you have Steven Strasburg, Syndergaard, and Berrios. A little bit more spaced out. Syndergaard's 46, Berrios 51. So where does he fall into the equation for you here in this top tier among 3 or 4 pitchers?
I'm not really getting to him. It's not like it would be shocking if he had a good game. Toronto has not been good offensively. Jose Berrios does have very good stuff. The reason that I'm not getting there is, for one, I think that Noah Syndergaard really stands out as the number one guy in that price tier.
And for you to say that, let's be clear, for you to say that when he's over 10K, that is saying a lot.
Dude, I had to write about 10K Noah Syndergaard and 9K John Lester in the same article today.
Oh, it's great. Look,
but yeah, I mean,
Berrios he's no Martin Perez, but I mean, it's not like Toronto's a juggernaut. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. But what it comes down to for me is that there's a lot of bats I want to pay for on the slate. So if I'm going to take risks at pitcher, I would rather do it on mid-range guys. And if I am paying up, I have Syndergaard clearly ahead of Berrios. I have Strasburg ahead of Berrios. It's a dangerous matchup for Strasburg, but he's also really, really good at pitching. So it's just tough for me to really get to Berrios. And if he's the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, then I'm just not going to win today. But it's just not a spot that I'm getting to. The home road splits do matter at least a little bit to me. They're not something that I want to weigh in too much because I still don't have a reason for why they exist, but they've been there for so long, and it's across the board. It's not like he just gives up more home runs on the road or something. He walks more guys. He strikes out less. He gives up more home runs. Everything for him, of course. So when you are kind of splitting hairs between the guys at the top, that's enough for me to have him behind Strasburg and behind Syndergaard.
I'm not even going to, no need to repeat any of that. Perfect analysis, man. Like, that's exactly what it is across the board. Another thing, too, the last thing I'll say is, if you were to look at his xFIP and say maybe this has just all been noise for his career, he has a 5.01 xFIP away from home for his career. That is well below average, actually. So it's pretty wild to see Berrios with an xFIP above 5 away from home. Oh, and also 0.64 home runs per 9 at home, elite. 1.78 on the road. That's like David Hess numbers. So, big difference.
I'm actually getting to a little bit of Toronto as like a cheap stack here too.
That's actually kind of an interesting concept because Berrios, while he's still one of the best pitchers on this slate in terms of run prevention here, the numbers away from home don't lie, and we've seen him struggle a lot. It's not the craziest idea if you're playing 150 lineups. If you're playing 10 or 20 lineups, I don't think you need to work much Toronto in.
Yeah, and like by saying I was getting a little bit, I got like similar amounts of Toronto as I did to Pittsburgh, like 7th or 8th stack for me. And it's really just because there's so much power at cheap price tags and guys like Smoke, Grichuk, Guerrero. If Berrios doesn't have it, you can get run into trouble with guys that cheap. So getting some there, but we're mostly interested in Minnesota bats in this game. They're a top 5 stack for me against Sanchez. And one thing I like about Minnesota, I talked about it in chat a little bit, is there's no one individual hitter on Minnesota that stood out for me as a top play at his position. Like in the deep dive article today, I don't think I wrote about any Minnesota hitter individually, but as a team, I really like them because we know that they're a really good offense. It's a perfectly fine park for power. They have a lot of lefties, and Sanchez struggles in general against lefties. He'll walk a lot of them, which makes me like the stack more than one-offs as well. But then even righties, Nelson Cruz in particular, matches up really well with the stuff that Sanchez throws. Basically, a hard sinker, curveball, and Cruz numbers are great there. So you get these top four guys that are all reasonably priced, all really good, all have a lot of upside. You get Marwin Gonzalez as a value guy to complete your stack. I think it's just a really high upside spot that maybe goes a bit overlooked because you have, Boston and Houston and Coors on this slate.
All right. Do you want to touch on anything else here? I think you covered it.
Nope.
Tampa,
that's it.
Tampa Bay and Arizona. So Jalen Beeks has been really good over the last two outings. If you played him, you did so at low ownership. The results were solid. I know because last time I had a bunch of Beeks. The time before, I wasn't feeling it. I was nervous that he wouldn't be able to go more than 3 innings because he hadn't done so yet this year. Then he goes 4 2/3, and then he goes 6 2/3. Granted, he only threw 84 pitches, averaged only 12.5 pitches per inning. So I'm not projecting Beeks for 6 innings or more. No chance. And his price has definitely come up. But let's talk about this for a minute. Ryan Stanek getting the nod to open this game, as we've seen. Jalen Beeks is your probable long reliever, and then Taylor Clark on the other side. Let's start with the Tampa Bay side and Jalen Beeks, who over his last 2 outings in relief has pitched 11 scoreless innings, allowing only 3 hits with 4 combined walks and 13 strikeouts. He's been magnificent.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go to Beeks as a mid-range guy, I wouldn't talk you off of it. He's not the one that I'm going to. I actually have Freddie Peralta ahead of him as far as the long relievers go. Arizona's lineup's just really dangerous. And I'm still not sold on Beeks. He's always had decent stuff. He's always had the ability to get swings and misses. It's just that he's not consistent. And when his price tag starts to rise, I just really don't want to get there in a dangerous matchup against, basically an entirely right-handed, with the exception of David Peralta, Arizona lineup that, has a DH now as well, although their DH isn't any good. But still, just a dangerous Arizona lineup. I don't really see myself getting to Beeks here.
Yeah, I'd mentioned today on the strategy show that he's definitely more expensive than I would like. I will say one thing though, just in case anyone's wondering. Last year when he came up, he was terrible. We both know this because we both played him a couple of times early on, and it went poorly both times. He was throwing his changeup a lot less frequently. This year he's throwing it a third of the time, 33% of the time on the changeup. Now, as far as swings and misses go, he's only getting about 14.5% whiffs, 27% whiffs per swing. Not great, but the pitch is holding batters to a 132 average with 0.053 isolated slugging. So the pitch also last year was very good, and it was good against opposite-handed hitters. While it's not getting a ton of swings and misses, he is limiting a lot of damage with that pitch and getting a ton of ground balls. So while I'm not necessarily sold on him either, I'm not totally surprised by the fact that he's getting better results this year overall.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. I also thought that he would get better going forward too. It's basically just a price thing for me why I'm not getting there. And like, he's really cheap on FanDuel, but you can't get a quality start out of him. So you're sacrificing some upside there. It's just really tough for me for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree. And I mentioned this morning as well. The one benefit to Beeks is that he, coming out of the bullpen, doesn't need to go 5 innings to get a win. So,
right, like
you're saying, on FanDuel, you need the quality start. On DraftKings, he could go 4 1/3. If he strikes out 7 and gets the win, you're looking all right. But that price is a little bit lofty given we've only seen a couple good performances, and this team is more imposing, is a little more threatening than the Royals team he faced twice in a row, What are your thoughts on Tyler Clark and or Tampa Bay hitters here?
I don't think Clark is very good. He doesn't project as a high strikeout guy. He doesn't get a lot of ground balls, especially against left-handed hitters. You can't look into his minor league numbers too much, at least his AAA numbers, because he did pitch in the PCL. But if you just look at the ground ball, the strikeout numbers and the ground ball to fly ball numbers, particularly to lefties, they're pretty scary. This game being in Tampa obviously helps him out, and the price tag on Tampa bats hurts a little bit. So for that reason, I'm not getting to tons of Tampa stacks, but whatever Tampa I do get to, especially Tommy Pham, Brandon Lau, G-Man Choi, Nate Lowe, those guys all have power, and they're all pretty interesting to me. It's just that, like, when you look at them individually, Brandon Lau at $5,000 or Jose Altuve at 4,300. Brandon Belt at 4,400 or G-Man Choi at basically the same price tag. It gets really tough to prioritize these guys, but I do think it's a high upside spot.
Okay. I don't know a ton about Clark at all. So I obviously did some research into him earlier today, but everything I've seen kind of just makes him, he looks like somebody that if he does end up settling in as, and by the way, you know how I don't know much about him? I called him Tyler Clark and his name's Taylor Clark. If he seems like the type of guy that in the event that he does settle into like a major league role, Adam, you're looking at like a fifth starter. I mean, this is a guy in AAA that in the minors once he hit single A ball, has never struck out a batter per inning. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing, but he's also never had a 40% ground ball rate either. When you're not getting strikeouts or ground balls, it seems like things could be difficult in the major league level.
Yeah, and especially he had more of a fly ball problem against lefties than righties in the minors too. He's the kind of guy where if he actually sticks around in a major league rotation, if he pitches well enough to do that, it's costing me money because I will probably not stop taking hitters against him.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Dude, you know who did that to me last year? Matt
Koch?
Matt, thank you.
Yep.
Matt Koch. And the thing that was the most frustrating, if you remember, we had people, dude, Adam Laffey, you guys are stupid. He's actually good. Like, I'm rostering Matt Koch. And then he would have good start after good start. The amount of warning track balls that were hit every night. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And then he would come in, and there's been once or twice since where he comes in like in long relief and gives up like 15 runs.
Yes.
And I don't have those stacks because he wasn't starting.
Exactly.
And I hate that guy.
Exactly. Oh God, it's just brutal. If you look at his fantasy points per game, it's 0 this year, which is it's not 0 because he hasn't pitched. He's pitched 20 and 2/3 innings, but it's 0 fantasy. He's had so many negatives to wipe away any positives. His fantasy point per game total has averaged out to 0.0.
Yeah, they just outrighted him like last week, I think.
What's that?
They just released him or sent him to AAA, one of the two, like last week.
Oh, yeah, they did outright. Yep. Yeah. God, but he was so good. Whatever. All right. Let's talk about Detroit and the Angels. We've got Daniel Norris on the mound and Griffin Canning. Look, I know Canning is a bit pricey here, so he's not an easy guy to get to. He's, by the way, 67 on FanDuel is a little bit different than DraftKings, where he's expensive, and 31 on Yahoo is super cheap for a 2-pitcher site. But just for a moment, and I get it was only one start, I do want to reiterate what I went over this morning because I thought it was pretty important. So he, in his first start, went up against the Toronto Blue Jays, didn't get out of the 5th inning, but he threw 82 pitches. He faced 18 batters. He had a 22% swinging strike rate. But that wasn't the only thing that was interesting here. Griffin Canning, in his debut, was sitting at 95 miles per hour on his fastball, maxed out around 97. The slider, though, which he threw a third of the time, had a whiff rate of 32% with 9 whiffs on 28 pitches thrown on that pitch. So what am I saying? Oh, and his curveball was thrown 20 times. He had a 20% whiff rate on that, got 4 whiffs. On the day, Adam, this is incredible, dude, on 82 pitches. He had 20 whiffs, 7 on his four-seamer, 9 on his slider, 4 on his curveball. For a guy coming up and making a debut, I don't care who you're facing, 20 whiffs on, and mind you, 7 on one pitch, 9 on another, and 4 on another. It wasn't just one pitch. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, the stuff looked really good. And
a lot of
you mentioned it
too. Sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning the price differences across sites, and that's really what it comes down to for me. As good as I think his stuff is, and as good as much as I like this matchup against the Tigers, he made 3 starts at AAA this year, never threw more than 82 pitches, was pulled at 82 pitches in that start against Toronto. I have no reason to think that he's going out there and going like deep enough into this game where I feel really good about paying 8,500 for him on DraftKings. But 31 on Yahoo, I absolutely love that price tag.
Oh, big time.
Really good spot, tons of upside. You don't need 7 innings out of him, to justify that price tag. And on FanDuel, it's a nice price as well. The one concern would be, he has to be really efficient to get 6 innings. And if he's striking out a lot of guys, he probably isn't being that efficient. So like a lot has to go right for him to actually give you a ton of raw points. But he's still cheap enough where if you're just jamming in like Boston plus Houston or something like that, he can pretty easily get you like a win or enough strikeouts to make up for the quality start. So Yahoo especially, I love him. FanDuel, I think he's a perfectly fine play. DraftKings, I'm not getting there, but it has nothing to do with him or his matchup. It just has to do with the price tag.
Right, and I'm with you there. I think it's very price or site dependent. Although I would let me just make this one point. And feel free to disagree, but it was something I was thinking about earlier. When you're looking at ownership, it is a 13-game slate, so it's going to be spread around a lot, particularly with hitters, though. As far as pitchers go, Noah Syndergaard and Colin McHugh on DraftKings are both going to be chalk. John Lester is going to be pretty popular, but Syndergaard and McHugh have a combined 66% ownership. Griffin Canning is basically the same price as McHugh, who has not looked great over the last couple of starts. I'm not sure if that's just a bump in the road, but he's projected at 3%. So while it's risky and I would go nowhere near him in cash games, I do have some interest that if he's effective, like I said, he still hasn't put it all together yet. I think we both agree it's his second start, but I'm definitely looking at a guy that can get a ton of swings and misses. If he had 10 strikeouts in 5 innings, I wouldn't be shocked against Detroit. And I could see him beating out a very popular McHugh. So while I like him a lot more on Yahoo, I don't think it's insane to think you could get some leverage with a guy like Griffin Canning at the same price.
No, I mean, I agree with you. Like, he can certainly beat McHugh here. The thing that makes it tough is, does he beat McHugh and Lester and Fried and Peralta and that's tough to do if you're only going to throw like 82, 85 pitches. Nola's in there too. And just as, guys that can go deep into games and have strikeout upside.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So
and look,
that's worse.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Like that's, I agree with you that if it were a smaller slate, I'd be more inclined to go to Canning despite the price tag.
That's fair. And again, there's a difference between being contrarian and just kind of like being stupid. I think Alex Baker, Awesemo, said in one of his articles that I read, it was like an MLB primer or something. It was like, he said, you don't get style points for having a roster filled with 1% players. And he's right. Like, a lot of times all you need are a couple of lower owned guys to get the job done. And if there's one advantage with Canning, it's that when I look at John Lester, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes 7 innings and allows only 1 run, but only strikes out 4 or 5. Same with McHugh. I think he's good, no question. But how many strikeouts are you getting there with Aaron Nola? What do we get? So I'm a little bit higher on the idea than you are, but I can also understand the trepidation with a guy that's only made 1 start and threw 82 pitches. What are your thoughts on the rest of this game now that we took up a lot of time on Canning?
Not a whole lot for me. Not going to Detroit bats. Mike Trout against Daniel Norris obviously it's Mike Trout in a positive park shift. So I like Trout a lot. In my initial crunch, I was getting like my fifth or sixth highest owned stack, Angels, just because they're so cheap. But I don't expect to actually end up there. I'll end up pulling back a little bit, just because I do think Norris is kind of better than my projections think they are, for various reasons. And I don't really like this Angels lineup. I do love Shohei Ohtani. He can hit lefties. He's a phenomenal hitter. He's reasonably priced. So you can add him, along with Mike Trout, as a really, really good hitter in this lineup. But then beyond that, you're just getting the guys like Fletcher and Simmons and Pujols, and I don't really want to get there.
What do you make of a guy like, obviously not talking about playing, but what do you make of a guy like Daniel Norris? Do you see him being someone that makes for a good target to stack against?
Not really. Not with a team like the Angels so much. For me, the appeal of stacking Angels here would be that they're cheap and that Detroit's bullpen isn't very good, and it's a good hitter's park, or definitely better than Angels. So there's upside throughout the game, but Norris I think is better than a lot than he has been in the past. He's someone that's dealt with a lot of injuries, but we've seen a couple of times him kind of look like he's starting to put things together. Has some good breaking stuff, gets some swings and misses. So I don't really love going against Norris unless I just have a lineup that has like a ton of right-handed power, which the Angels don't.
Gotcha. All right. Let's keep it going then. We've got several more games to get to here. Milwaukee, Washington. Scherzer did kind of exactly what I was anticipating yesterday. Got himself in a jam or two, but struck out 10 batters and threw 112 pitches. That was more like the Scherzer that we've been accustomed to seeing. And again, Adam, it proves that this is a very dangerous Milwaukee lineup, but also a Milwaukee lineup that will strike out. Steven Strasburg, you mentioned at the top of the show, is a very good pitcher. Interesting spot here in the same position that Max Scherzer had a pretty good night in yesterday. What are your thoughts here? Steven Strasburg, and then we'll get to the other side. You teased a little bit of Freddie Peralta love, but we'll start with the most expensive pitcher here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to go to Strasburg because I think that Syndergaard's going to have so much more ownership. But at the same time, kind of like I had said with Berrios, with all the hitting on this slate, if I'm not going to Syndergaard, I kind of want to just get out of that top tier and hope that Syndergaard disappoints and that my mid-tier guys, match him, as opposed to paying up for a pitcher that is more expensive than Syndergaard and that is facing Milwaukee. Like Strasburg is really good, but he has to be really, really efficient on this slate, I think, in terms of strikeouts and getting deep into the game for you to be really happy that you paid up for him when you consider that you're sacrificing Houston, Boston, Coors Field, just so many different spots for hitters. I'm not getting to a lot of them in my initial crunch. I think that most of my roster construction will basically just be either I pay up for Syndergaard or I just don't pay up a pitcher.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, the other side of this, you have Adrian Hauser anticipated to be the we know he's going to start the game. How far he goes, I don't know. I'm guessing he throws an inning or maybe more, but Freddie Peralta is expected to pitch and basically lost his starting job after, one of 5 good performances this season, and the others were just awful. I mean, we're talking, dude, he failed to get past 4 innings. He went 4 innings, 3 1/3, 3 1/3, 8 and 3. The 8-inning masterpiece against Cincinnati was phenomenal. Outside of that, he's been awful. And it kind of speaks to the fact that we've been saying for a while, he would make for a perfect reliever because he relies on one pitch and can mix in a curveball. But how long can you keep starting and doing exactly what you're doing without making adjustments before you get rocked? The answer was about, half a season.
Yeah, and I want to preface it with, I'm not a big Freddie Peralta guy. We've never seen a pitcher like him with his build or with his arsenal have sustained success in the major leagues. So I'm not saying that I think Freddie Peralta is like a great pitcher or anything, but when Freddie Peralta does have success, you would expect it to come against a primarily right-handed lineup, and it's not a good right-handed lineup at that. You have Anthony Rendon back, but it's still a pretty weak lineup with no Soto, with no Adams, and this slate, basically every pitcher has legitimate question marks. So getting, a reasonably priced Freddie Peralta on DraftKings, which is really the only spot that I'm interested in him, against this team at probably low ownership, I think is pretty appealing, even though he has been so bad this year. One thing that does stand out is They actually mentioned it on the Milwaukee broadcast during his most recent start. He has really, really struggled in first innings ever since coming up. In the first inning since debuting last year, he's allowed a 367 expected WOBA. Innings 2 through 9, he's at 289. So it certainly shouldn't hurt him that he's going to miss, Eaton, Robles, Rendon until, probably his second or third inning of work. So I think that helps him out. And again, it's just that I think he'll be low enough owned, and this Washington lineup is watered down enough where I don't mind taking a chance and hoping that him coming in long relief does a trick for him.
All right. How far do you think he can go?
I think it depends on Hauser. Like if Hauser only goes an inning or two, I think you can get 5-6 out of Peralta.
I mean, he's definitely stretched. It's not like he isn't stretched out. He threw 90 pitches 4 days ago or 5 days ago.
Yeah, and Milwaukee's bullpen has also been shockingly bad this year. So I don't think it's a situation where they're like, okay, if we can just get Peralta from innings 3 through 6, we'll be good. Like I'm sure they would love to just let him turn it over to the very back end.
For sure. Hey, by the way, it'd be a fun time to introduce what was it? CSW? Is that what it was? What was the abbreviation? Yeah. Called
I think it was CSW.
Right?
Called swinging.
Yeah. So a stat that combines called strikes and swinging strikes, they ran some studies on correlations and found that it actually correlates really well with was it Sierra? Right?
Yeah, Sierra.
With Sierra. And I just was curious, so I looked up Griffin Canning's CSW, I think. Well, either way, it's called strikes, swinging strikes combined. 36.5% in that first game. 35+% is elite. So whether you roster the guy or not, pay attention to him. See if that was fluky or not. I don't know if it was, but 36.5%. He had 10 called strikes and 20 swinging strikes in that game. All right.
Yeah, that's really. I mean, it's obviously really good.
What are your thoughts outside of the pitchers here? Are you interested in any bats when you're looking at like Travis Shaw? Oh, is Shaw not in the lineup? Yeah, he is batting seventh.
Shaw, yeah, he's batting seventh.
Yeah. $2,900 on DraftKings. You're surely going to get him discounted. He's almost minimum salary on FanDuel. He's $9 on Yahoo. Are there any Milwaukee bats that you have interest in here against Strasburg?
No, not really. I ran some Milwaukee stacks yesterday against Scherzer, but that was just a different slate because there was so much good pitching, and I expected Scherzer to get a good amount of ownership, and I really liked the Milwaukee lineup that was out there. It's not really the case today with Milwaukee. I'm not planning on getting to either side.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem necessary here. St. Louis and Philly. Here's another spot yesterday that was. So you had Miles Mikolas go 7 scoreless with 3 hits and 5 K. I mean, easily the best performance of the season for him. And it came against the Philly team that sometimes they are just the worst. I mean, they'll go out and drop 10 runs and then the next day cannot get a hit. Literally 2-3 hits on the night. We saw that again yesterday. Now you have Dakota Hudson on the mound, the young right-hander, and Aaron Nola on the other side of this game. What are your thoughts on Nola, man? He has not had one elite start this season. He's had some good ones. His last 2, he's done a good job limiting the opposition to 1 run apiece. And earlier this year, he had that 1-run game against Atlanta where he struck out 8 but walked 5. What are you expecting to get from Nola against the St. Louis Cardinals, a good, disciplined team in 80-degree weather at Busch Stadium? Very curious to get your take on Nola here.
This spot scares me for Nola.
Me too.
Getting him outside of Philly, he's one of the Philadelphia pitchers that basically always sees the strikeout numbers year over year go down outside of Philadelphia, which we expect. And it's a really dangerous matchup. It's right-handed heavy, the Cardinals lineup, which is good, but they're just such good hitters. And a lot of, we talked yesterday about them having good fastball hitters, a lot of good curveball hitters in this lineup as well. Not saying that translates into them just pounding Nola or anything, because when he's on, his curveball is better than most. But it's guys that clearly have shown the ability to hit curveballs, hit them for power. And we know that's a pitch that Nola needs to rely on when he is pitching well. The Vegas total in this game is kind of like suspiciously high to me as well. Right now, a 4.4 implied run total against Nola for the Cardinals. That scares me, and just the fact that he's more expensive than some other pitchers that I can take risks on. I'm not really getting to him. Not getting to a lot of Cardinals bats either, but I do like the idea of going to like Paul Goldschmidt or Matt Carpenter as one-offs just because of the upside in their price tags.
Yeah, like you said, Carpenter remains really discounted, man. 3,800 on DraftKings, 33 on FanDuel is pretty decent as well on Yahoo. He's 13. I don't have an issue with a guy like Carpenter leading off for the Cardinals here at a park that, when it heats up, generally plays pretty well for hitters. What about the other side of this one, Philly against Dakota Hudson? I got to be honest, man. Stacking the Phillies has gone poorly for me more times than it hasn't this year, and it's quite surprising given the amount of should be quality hitters in this lineup.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised how my crunches came out with regard to this game because, for one, I don't like taking pitchers against Philly, and I'm with you. I roster Philly bats a lot, but with really no cheap pitching on this slate, I'm getting to Dakota Hudson as one of the two cheap guys that I get to in those lineups where I'm really paying up for bats. And I don't think it's completely crazy because there's only 3 left-handed bats in the lineup for Philadelphia. Now, the righties are really good. It's not like it's a spot where if Hudson doesn't have his best stuff, he's going to be able to get by. But against righties so far this season, a 14.2% swinging strike percentage, 271 expected WOBA, expected ISO below 100. That obviously is all really, really good. He's gotten lit up by lefties, which is really concerning. And I love Bryce Harper here again, at a cheap price point. Hudson basically a guy that works down in the zone, relies on his sinker. One of the biggest holes the teams have been able to exploit for Harper have been fastballs up and away. And that's not really the type of pitcher Hudson is. So I think that it's a spot where Harper should have success, but at a really cheap price tag on two pitcher sites, or I guess really on DraftKings, because I'd rather roster Griffin Canning on Yahoo. But on DraftKings, where he's not cheap, I think getting to some Hudson against this right-handed heavy lineup makes some sense.
All right. I like that. I really don't have an issue with it. Harper, I'm just going to have to keep rostering until I can't do it anymore. In these type of spots, it's really difficult to get away from him. Particularly when you look at a price of $4,500 on DraftKings. I mean, he goes through some really bad slumps, but he can't stay this bad forever. 17 on Yahoo is also pretty appealing. Yeah, I'm just going to have to keep going there, at least against Hudson. But I don't think you're wrong. It's not a crazy idea to say that Hudson against this righty-laden team can go out there and have a good game. He could also get destroyed in this start too. But
yeah, on a lot of 13-game slates, I would have like no interest there. But basically, you're talking about, if you're looking at cheap pitching, you're talking about like him, Quantrill, Sampson, Senzatella, and Coors. I'll take him and Quantrill.
All right. Chicago, Miami, Caleb Smith, John Lester. Right now, Lester's got 22% expected ownership on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, only one pitcher site. He's down at 15, but that's still top 10 on the slate, not just pitching, but on the slate overall. On Yahoo at 20%, that seemed high to me, given his price tag and some other guys being way cheaper. Canning, even McHugh being a lot cheaper than him. Where are you going here at pitching? I'm a huge fan of Caleb Smith. I don't think this will be the spot that I get to him, but I just love what he's doing, and all 3 of his pitches have been excellent this season, man. He's awesome, but a pretty imposing lineup for Chicago. What do you think here, these 2 arms?
Did you say what we had Caleb Smith's projected ownership at?
I believe it's going to be low. Let me check right here. Oh, and by the way, also pretty relevant, 12-mile-per-hour winds blowing, it's now 13, blowing in from left center field, and which is not good for righties. 46-degree game time temperatures at Wrigley. So you have that. Caleb Smith, we're looking at 8% on DraftKings. On Yahoo, where he is $44, he's at 15%. And on FanDuel, I'm assuming you mean the 2 pitcher sites, but 2% on FanDuel at $10K.
Right. So I like Smith in tournaments. you mentioned the weather, and that obviously is relevant here, especially in Wrigley. Not a lot of strikeouts in the Cubs lineup, but Smith's stuff is just really, really good. You mentioned that called strike plus swinging strike percentage earlier, and for all starting pitchers this year that have thrown at least 200 pitches, the only pitchers with a higher called strike plus swinging strike percentage are Steven Strasburg, Blake Snell, and Max Scherzer. Then you have Caleb Smith. He's been that good. He has 3 pitches to get swinging strikes, which is a big deal because you can match up against different hitters. Some hitters are better against his changeup, some are better against his slider, but all of his stuff is good enough. His fastball even has a 13% swinging strike percentage against righties. There's so many ways for him to get swings and misses, and you're going to see people go to John Lester at a similar price tag because he's facing the Marlins, but there's not strikeouts in the Marlins lineup either. And Smith has much better strikeout stuff than Lester does. You're talking about a pitcher who's the 4th or 5th most expensive pitcher on DraftKings, but has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate. That's really appealing to me in tournaments, even though the matchup isn't ideal. So I do want to be overweight on Smith in tournaments. I do think I'll get there. As far as Lester goes, if I end up getting around the field, I'm fine with that because it's a really bad Miami team. It's really good pitching weather. But at the same time, when you start talking about rostering Lester at like a $9,000 price tag, there's just so many ways for that to disappoint. Whether he gets unlucky on balls in play, whether he just pitches poorly. There's so many things that can go wrong. He has struck out 26.5% of hitters this year, but I don't buy into that being something that he sustains because his swinging strike percentage is about the same as last year. His chase percentage is about the same as last year. The only thing really different that he's throwing is that he's throwing his cutter more, but that's not a pitch that gets swings and misses. So I don't think that's leading to this huge uptick in strikeout percentage. I think he could end up coming in around like 23% where he was a couple of years ago, but I still, I don't think he's what he has been so far this year. So it's basically, it's a bad offense. It's great pitching weather. I'm not going to, talk anyone off of Lester, but I just don't think he's the same. He has the same kind of ceiling that guys like Syndergaard or Caleb Smith do.
Right. I agree with you on that. No question. I'm having a tougher time getting the Lester. Maybe in cash, I could understand that, but he's still not somebody that makes a whole lot of sense. Just given the lack of upside that you're getting, almost every game, even in pretty appealing spots, it's hard to fall in love with somebody like John Lester. Let's keep it moving then. We got a few games to go here, but before we do, are you interested in any hitters? I will, again, tell you, at 45, 46 degrees, it's not to say that these guys can't send one out of Wrigley, but definitely not conducive to hitting this weather tonight.
Yeah, not particularly good hitting weather, not really looking to get to much of anything from this game.
Okay. What about Houston and Kansas City? I mentioned a minute ago that Colin McHugh has some of the highest projected ownership across the board. Specifically on DraftKings, you're getting him very high up there at 33%. Run total of 3.7 for Kansas City. And then, of course, against Duffy is Houston. They have the highest total, tied with Boston at 5.9. So definitely two different stories happening here. One against Duffy and one in favor of McHugh. Where do you land on Colin McHugh?
I like him a lot here. I wasn't real sure. I dug in going into the deep dive today because I was kind of hesitant going against what I expected to be 5 lefties. There's only 4 in there, but he's been able to get swings and misses against hitters from both sides. If you pull up Brooks Baseball and look at his zone profile, he's burying that slider down and into lefties where you need it, getting a lot of swings and misses. Everything looks good. And if you go through and look at how Kansas City's done against sliders, there's 2 guys in the lineup that have been better than average over the last 3 years in terms of expected WOBA. Basically, the entire lineup has high swing strike percentage or high whiff percentages against the pitch, and he's reasonably priced. He's $800 less than Lester, and I think that he has more strikeout upside here. So I'm perfectly happy getting to Colin McHugh.
Okay, yeah, and I totally agree. He's one of the better pitching options on this slate. Is there anything about his last few starts? Did you see anything? I know when you dig in for the deep dive, you're going to look to see if anything happened. 2 of his last 3 have been really brutal. Well, one was. It came in Texas, so I don't worry too much about that. I guess outside of that, Minnesota just doesn't strike out a lot, and he got 9 Ks against Cleveland but gave up 3 runs. 3 home runs. He has allowed 6 home runs over his last 3 games. That might just be a product of the matchups, though.
Yeah, that was something else that stood out, too. If you look at his actual numbers versus his expected numbers this year, he's allowed a 150 ISO to lefties and a 197 ISO to righties, but his expected ISO to lefties is just 169 and it's just 151 to righties. So
Okay.
I think he has pitched into some bad luck in terms of home runs.
Yeah, sure. Hitters, unless you like Danny Duffy here, we can talk about these Houston bats.
No, I like the Houston bats. The one quick caveat I would put out there is that I am paying attention to these next couple of starts from Duffy because he has basically scrapped his two-seamer and he's throwing his slider a lot more in addition to his curveball. Anytime you see someone take away their two-seam fastball and start throwing more breaking balls, I start to get interested. But even if we know for sure that Duffy is better than last season, I would still like Houston bats here against, a lefty in Houston and a weak Kansas City bullpen. So I'm not saying that to, deter you from Houston, but it's something to pay attention to. The price tags on these Houston guys are really nice. You have 4,300 Altuve on DraftKings. George Springer's price tag came down. Bregman's still affordable. He grades out actually as my favorite play from the Astros. But then the bottom of this order again, you have a power bat in Tyler White at 3,600. You have Aledmys Diaz in the lineup. Chirinos as a high upside catcher option. It's just a stack that you can really go top to bottom. And even Jake Marisnick batting ninth has some pop. So there's just a lot of different ways to approach stacking this team from the expensive guys at the top down to cheap guys at the bottom. They're one of my highest owned stacks.
Okay, as they should be. Colorado and San Francisco. A few games to go here, but first, Awesemo.com. We'd love to have you check it out if you've yet to do so. Happy to have you watching our live free videos on YouTube. But if you want to get a look behind the curtain and check out all of the stuff we have from the ownership projections, the player projections, projections, articles, ownership for all sports, PGA, hockey, NBA, MLB, NASCAR, MMA, NFL, everything. We've got it all at Awesemo.com. You can get 50% off your first month of subscription simply by using the promo code Deeper Dive. All one word, Deeper Dive. And also the Fantasy Cruncher add-on with Fantasy Cruncher Pro, which is really, really, really cool. So all of that over at Awesemo.com. 50% off your first month. Use the promo code Deeper Dive. One more. Don't forget to use that when you sign up, because there's no reason to pay full price when you get 50% off by using, a one-word promo code, not two. And say what's up in the Slack chat when you do premium Slack chat. Talking DFS around the clock. So, Adam, Colorado, San Francisco. Were you as surprised as I was on DraftKings to see how cheap the San Francisco bats were compared to how much DraftKings prices anybody up, no matter how bad you are when they're at Coors?
Yeah, I mean the Giants suck, but the one that really shocked me is Brandon Belt's 4,400.
44. I know, it's crazy. I say the same thing this morning.
You could justify everyone on the Giants having these same price tags if you just make Belt like 5,800. You're good.
Right.
But they didn't. And so, I mean, Belt's one of my highest owned hitters on the entire slate. Absolutely love him. Senzatel has done a decent job of, limiting damage, especially against left-handed hitters. But you're talking about a guy that throws 60 to 70% fastballs and doesn't miss bats in a ballpark that, just plays up everything, doubles, triples, home runs, everything goes up in Coors Field. It's the biggest ballpark shift you can get going from San Francisco to Coors. And they're just so reasonably priced that it's tough for me not to have them as like a top 5 stack.
Right. I mean, it's very difficult not to. Josh this morning mentioned that he really liked Bumgarner and was going to be super overweight on him. Also mentioned that you were making fun of him on Twitter. So we can't move on before I get your opinion on this on the Deeper Dive.
Yeah, so Bumgarner is not great. He's not bad. The Rockies lineup is bad, but he's pitching in Coors, and I just don't really see the need to get to him. I would rather take a chance on Peralta against that Nats team than take a chance on Bumgarner and Coors at a similar price tag, is basically what it comes down for me, like in that mid-range. Bumgarner, since the start of the 2017 season against right-handed hitters outside of San Francisco, is allowing 1.6 home runs per 9. He's striking out about 20% of hitters. He's allowed, I think it was like a 340 WOBA. It's just, and it's not like it's a terrible Rockies lineup. Like, you have Story and Arenado in there. Murphy's a tough strikeout for anyone. Blackman, obviously lefty, but again, a tough enough strikeout. Desmond's been terrible. Tapia's bad, or not good at least. But those top 4 can make life difficult. I especially, of course, like Story and Arenado. I'm not getting to Bumgarner here.
Yeah. Neither am I. but I do understand it. Like I'm willing to roster guys at cores. It's not that I'm not. It's just Bumgarner's not one of them that I like a lot today. It's not just that it's Coors Field, but 55 degrees here. It's not the perfect hitting weather. By the way, it's also we're looking at rain as well. I don't know. I haven't looked over the past like since we started the show, but it looked like there was a risk for some rain. So keep an eye on that, especially if you plan on targeting pitching. What are you doing with Colorado bats?
A lot of Story, a lot of Arenado, and then probably getting them as like my fifth highest though in full stack.
All right, let's go ahead and burn through these 3 games. Hey, by the way, as you know, Yahoo sponsors the Deeper Dive. I just threw the link for sign up into our YouTube chat under Dave Lochran, not under Awesemo. You'll see it right there. If you haven't signed up for Awesemo.com, or sorry, at yahoosports.com, use that link when you do it and get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points, YSRPs, Adam, when you deposit. And check out all of the contests they have. You know, you're not going to get the massive prize pools, but you're also getting no MME if you're looking to hand make your lineups, lower management fees, sometimes none, and a much better way to play for those of you that don't want to or don't have the time to crunch 150 lineups and go through all of that work every day with spreadsheets and so on and so forth. Yahoo Sports DFS is a perfect spot for that. So use that link in the sign up or in the YouTube chat to sign up if you've yet to do so. All right, Adam, let's go. 3 more to go here. Cincinnati and Oakland. Tyler Mahle, Mike Fiers. What are you doing with this one? Mike Fiers, sorry.
Not a whole lot of anything. Tyler Mahle is, I think, a reasonable play with a huge park shift going into Oakland, facing a lot of righties. The 2 things he's pretty bad at are getting out lefties and pitching in Cincinnati. Not doing either of those things here, but still not a ton of strikeout upside for him, and the price tag's not really that cheap. So I'd rather go to Hudson. I'd rather go to Quantrill. On the other side, it's a park downgrade for Cincinnati power. I think Yasiel Puig's too cheap. I think Eugenio Suarez is a really good play. But outside of that, just not getting to much of anything. Matt Olson should be back today for Oakland. It's a really good spot for him. The thing I would caution, though, is that the broken hamate bone that he's coming back from does tend to sat power for a while. So I would just kind of keep an eye on that.
Olson and Suarez are the 2 guys I like most here. Olson because he's really good, and Suarez because he's also good, but he's very cheap as well. Those are the 2 guys that stand out the most to me. I don't think you need to pay, $4,500 for a guy like Dietrich. Puig is $3,900 batting cleanup. That's another spot that I'm willing to go to, but really just looking for cheaper bats here. Mostly Suarez and Olson, and I think Puig is fine in that cleanup spot. But that's about it for me. As far as the Dodgers and Atlanta Braves go, with Hyunjin Ryu and Max Fried, I'm not getting Ryu, and I like Fried a lot, but against the Dodgers, I'll pass. There are enough guys in the mid-range and the high end to where I'm just okay not really risking it here. But I know Josh and I had a different take on Ryu today. Which side of this fence are you on against Atlanta?
I have basically nothing from this game. Not getting to Ryu. I love Max Fried as a pitcher, but I just not in this matchup on this slate for me. And I respect both pitchers a ton, so I'm not really getting hitters against them either.
All right, neither am I. This is one of the games that we know we'd be able to get through quickly. And if you guys have any questions afterwards you don't think we got to, well, Live Before Lock is coming up right after us. You can hit us up on Twitter. Our handles are right there. And you can hit us up in Slack chat if you're a premium sub. So we'll be happy to answer those questions leading up to lock. Mets and San Diego, we got to get out of here, but I think this will be a quick one. Syndergaard, for the first time in a very long time, is someone that you're willing to pay up for. That pretty much says it all.
Yeah, I mean, the Padres, one of the better strikeout matchups, second highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. Bill Miller is the home plate umpire here, one of the most favorable, if not the most favorable, pitchers umpire in baseball. Still a reasonable price tag on Syndergaard, and I'm just willing to take my chances here against a right-handed heavy lineup that strikes out a lot. I think that it's a better match. He's just as good as any pitch on the slate talent-wise, and his matchup's just better than the other ones. So I'm willing to go there, especially when you factor in and the home plate umpire as well. And then Quantrill on the other side, not a high strikeout guy throughout the minors, does have, decent stuff, throws, averages around 95 on his fastball. But the thing that really stands out for me is that he is really cheap. He has the same favorable umpire that Syndergaard has. And it's not like it's the best Mets lineup in the world. They're not, terrible, but if Quantrill is able to throw strikes and has reasonably decent stuff, you should be able to pay off that price tag. So this game, for the most part, is just pitching for me.
Yeah, I have no hitters from this game, so I feel all right heading out. But before we do, your top stacks, Adam. Hey, by the way, coming up on Live Before Lock, it is Jake and it is Chris. They're going to bring you up till 7:05 Eastern time. Who are your top stacks?
Boston, Houston, Minnesota, San Francisco, Colorado.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Wish you the best of luck tonight. And before you head out, if you like the show, you like the content, you want to see more, consider supporting us with a thumbs up by liking the video. It helps us greatly, and we really appreciate it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. Until next time, good luck. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Wednesday's Deeper Dive Live Before Lock, coming up right now.